Hello, this is Module 8, the elements of the paper. In this module, we will look at the remaining elements of the paper that have not been discussed. Then we'll see how to put the paper together. See Section 8 of the APA Manual for more detailed information. Following completion of Module 8, the student should be able to list the elements of a paper in APA style, describe what to include in the introduction of the paper, discuss how to complete a review of the literature, describe the discussion or body of the paper, and describe the summary or conclusion of the paper. The elements of a paper, sometimes called a manuscript, include the title page, which was discussed in Learning Module 2, the introduction, a review of the literature, a discussion, and a summary conclusion, and the reference list, also called the references page, and this was discussed in Learning Module 7. This module will address the introduction, the review of the literature, the discussion, and the summary and conclusion. The introduction of a paper provides a direction or a roadmap of the paper. The introduction should spark the reader's interest in reading the paper, but it's a difficult section of the paper to write. Although there is no guideline as to the length of the introduction, it should be concise and short. If you are writing a term paper, you may have specific instructions about what to include in the introduction. First, tell the reader explicitly what the thesis or the point of the paper is by defining and explaining the topic. Next, indicate why the topic is important to the reader in a compelling, clear, and convincing manner. Make the reader want to continue reading and acting on the issue. Finally, state your position and how you plan to support it. You can guide the reader by indicating the purpose for writing the paper on the topic. Avoid the following in the introduction. Do not introduce background information. Do not have a long introduction. Half a page or less is appropriate. Do not begin with a dictionary definition. Do not begin with a grand generalization. An introduction that begins throughout nursing's history is not a very good way to begin. The second paragraph connects the introduction and the discussion. It provides the transition between the general information of the introduction and the detail of the first point of the paper. A literature review is a critical evaluation of a collection of published references or materials that focus on a particular topic. The review discusses these publications as they relate to the topic or issue selected. A term paper will have a review of the literature as part of the paper, or the assignment may be a literature review paper. In a review of the literature, the author synthesizes key theories and results in a field of study by describing, evaluating, and critiquing resources. The author defines and clarifies the topic, summarizes prior investigations of the topic or the issue, identifies relationships, contradictions, gaps, and inconsistencies in the literature, and suggests further steps in solving the problem of the topic or issue. And more information about this is found in the APA Manual on page 10. The first step in the literature review is to search databases for articles that focus on the topic. Use keywords to search databases. If necessary, you may need to refine the search by narrowing the topic. When writing the review of the literature, indicate how you obtained the information and articles. Identify which databases you searched and list the keywords that were used. This helps the reader who wants to find similar resources. Use literature as evidence to support or refute your position about the topic or issue discussed. Describe how the articles you've selected support your position. The literature review paper contains an introduction, a discussion, and a conclusion. In the introduction, the topic, issue, or problem is defined and explained. Describe the overall trends in what has been published about the topic, conflicts in theory, methodology, or evidence, and gaps in research. Provide a rationale for the literature review. What is the purpose? Explain the criteria you used in analyzing the literature and how you organized the review. You may also state why certain resources were or were not used. In the discussion, a literature review can be arranged in several ways. First, the review can be chronological, in which the references are discussed in chronological order. This might be useful when completing historical research. A thematic review is organized according to similar concepts or theories, or that focus on a particular topic. This type of review might focus on attributes or characteristics of the issue being discussed, such as eating habits associated with obesity or characteristics of adolescents who are anorexic. The methodological review focuses on similarities authors take when researching the issue. This review might look at studies in which the researchers use the same or different methods to do the research. The literature review is an analysis and synthesis of the articles. It is not a list of summaries. Each paragraph in the review should address the point you are making, not the author who supports your position. Be selective. APA suggests 1 or 2 references per main point of discussion. Use direct quotes sparingly, as discussed in the previous module. You may paraphrase, but don't forget to cite the source. The reader is interested in your ideas about the literature. Begin and end each paragraph with your ideas, and then summarize and synthesize the literature in the middle. The purpose of the discussion section of the paper is to describe your interpretations of the topic or issue, explain the implications of the literature and your findings, and make recommendations for future research. The goal of the discussion is to support the thesis presented in the introduction, explain the results of the research and how the research supports the thesis, and how the literature fits into the body of knowledge. If you are completing a research project, then the results of your research should support the thesis you presented in the introduction and expand the body of knowledge. Develop an outline or use headings to organize your thoughts and ideas logically. Keep the discussion as short as possible. However, you need to state, support, explain, and defend your position clearly and fully. Maintain a focus as you write by following your outline. The following may help you to organize and write the discussion section. 1. Move from general to specific. Your findings should move from the literature to theory and to practice. 2. Use the same terminology, appropriate voice, and verb tense as in the introduction and as defined by APA. You may need to operationally define terms for the reader. Do not mix terms or use them interchangeably unless you define them first. Begin the discussion by restating your thesis from the introduction. Support the thesis with the results. Explain how your results relate to expectations and the literature. Describe relationships. Use tables or figures to enhance the relationships and support your thesis. Defend your thesis with your findings or the literature. Explain why your answer is satisfactory and why others are not. Discuss and evaluate conflicting explanations, unexpected findings, and potential limitations. 7. Summarize concisely the principal implications. Provide no more than 2 recommendations for further study. And number 8. In short, discuss everything concisely, briefly, and specifically. A strong conclusion is necessary for making a final impression. The conclusion is not the section in which to introduce new ideas. The goals of the conclusion are to restate the main points of the paper and to synthesize the works. Don't repeat ideas from the paper, but reveal how the main points of the paper relate to each other. The conclusion should end with a definite positive statement. Some suggestions for the conclusion are: 1. Include a brief synthesis of the main points of the paper. 2. Ask a question, use a quotation, or call for action. And 3. Suggest results or consequences. Do not begin the summary with "in conclusion" or "in summary." Do not state the thesis for the first time in the conclusion or end with a rephrased thesis statement, and do not include evidence that should be in the discussion. When formatting the completed paper, appearance is important. Typeface, line spacing, margins, paragraphs and indentation, and running head are included when putting it all together. APA specifies the use of a serif typeface, typically Times New Roman, in a 12-point font size for the text, tables, and figure captions. A sans serif typeface, such as Arial, may be used within figures for visual effect. Use double space for lines between all text and after every line in the title, headings, footnotes, quotations, references, and figure captions, and this information can be found in section 8.03 of the manual. Do not add extra line spacing in the title information. 1-inch margins at the top, bottom, and right and left sides are the default for Word and are recommended in APA for the paper. Align the text flush along the left margin, which means to left justify. Identify the first line of text in every paragraph, at least 5 to 7 spaces or half an inch. The running head was also discussed in Learning Module 2, so make sure your learning head is correct. Thank you for listening to this module, and I hope it helps you as you're writing your papers.